They thought they could define my worth with a few numbers on a performance review. They believed my voice wasn't loud enough to shatter the fortress of power they'd built around themselves. But with a single piece of evidence, I tore through their facade of lies, and everything they had, every last piece of their empire, crumbled at my feet. They decided what I was worth to them, so I showed them exactly what they were worth to the world. Nothing but criminals in expensive suits, waiting to be exposed. My name is Emily Carter. And for 6 years, I believed that Redwood Capital Group was where I'd build my legacy. At 34, I had climbed higher than most women ever did in Denver's cutthroat investment world. Senior Financial Analyst. The title sat heavy on my business cards, a testament to countless late nights, sacrificed weekends, and the pieces of myself I'd willingly carved away to fit into their mold. The morning everything changed started like any other. I arrived at our glass tower on 17th Street at 6:45 a.m., beating even the most ambitious junior associates. My heels clicked against marble floors as I passed the reception desk, where Sandra offered her usual sympathetic smile, the kind reserved for women who dared to swim with sharks. I should have seen it coming when Brad Morrison, our CFO, avoided eye contact in the elevator. When Jennifer from HR suddenly appeared at my office door at 9 a.m. with that practiced, corporate smile that never reached her eyes. Emily, Mr. Whitfield would like to see you in the boardroom. The boardroom, not his office. The boardroom meant witnesses, formality, decisions already made. I found them arranged like a tribunal, CEO Robert Whitfield at the head, flanked by Brad Morrison and 2 other executive vice presidents whose names I'd learned to associate with country club memberships and SEC investigations that mysteriously disappeared. The morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows cast them in silhouettes, faceless judges of my worth. Emily, please sit. Whitfield's voice carried that paternalistic tone I'd grown to despise. The leather chair felt cold against my back. They had a folder. There's always a folder when they're about to destroy you professionally. Brad opened it with theatrical precision, pulling out performance metrics, project assessments, peer reviews, all doctored, all damning. After careful consideration of your recent performance, Whitfield began, his fingers steepled like a priest delivering last rites. The leadership team has concluded that you haven't demonstrated the executive capabilities we require for your position. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. 6 years of exceeding targets, of saving their portfolios during the 2022 market downturn, of catching discrepancies that saved millions, reduced to insufficient executive capabilities. Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning to a junior analyst role in our retail division. Brad's smirk barely registered anymore. The retail division, corporate Siberia, where careers went to die. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind them about the Morrison Industries deal I'd salvaged, the one that earned the firm $47 million in fees. But I saw it in their eyes, that particular glaze of predetermined judgment. They weren't evaluating my worth. They were informing me of the value they'd already assigned. Is this about the Davidson account? I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Whitfield's jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago, I'd questioned irregularities in our handling of the Davidson pension fund. Nothing actionable, just questions. The kind that made men like Whitfield adjust their collar and change the subject. This is about leadership fit, he replied, the words rehearsed and hollow. Leadership fit? Code for, you're not one of us. You ask too many questions. You don't play golf at Cherry Hills. You don't laugh at Morrison's degrading jokes about his secretary. You're a woman who forgot her place. They gave me an hour to clean out my office, my real office, the one with windows and a door that locked. Security would escort me to my new desk afterward, a cubicle on the 3rd floor between the coffee machine and the men's bathroom. As I packed 6 years into a cardboard box, I stared at the city below. Denver sprawled endlessly, indifferent to the small devastations happening in its towers. My reflection in the window looked foreign, hollow eyes, rigid spine, hands that wouldn't stop shaking. They thought they'd broken me. They thought they'd calculated my worth down to the penny and found me wanting. But as I placed my awards in that box, awards they'd given me when I was useful, something crystallized in my chest. Not defeat, not resignation. Rage. Pure. Focused. Patient rage. If they wanted to define my worth, I'd let them, but I'd make damn sure they understood the price of undervaluing someone who knew where their bodies were buried. Every suspicious trade, every offshore account, every SEC violation they thought they'd hidden, I'd been watching, documenting, waiting. They'd decided my worth. Now, I would decimate theirs. The third floor was corporate purgatory. Fluorescent lights hummed with the persistence of a migraine, and the stale air reeked of burnt coffee and broken dreams. My new desk, a gray cubicle barely large enough to turn around in, sat directly across from the men's bathroom. Every flush, every crude joke from inside, reminded me of how far they'd pushed me down. Within hours, the whispers started. Amazing how fast good news travels in a place that feeds on others' misfortunes. By lunch, everyone knew. Emily Carter, the rising star, had crashed and burned. The woman who thought she could play with the big boys had been put back in her place. "Heard you got a reality check," Marcus from accounting said, leaning against my cubicle wall with fake sympathy. The same Marcus who'd asked me to review his reports just last week, desperate for my expertise. Former allies became ghosts. Sarah, who I'd mentored for 2 years, walked past without acknowledgement. Tom, whose job I'd saved during restructuring, suddenly found urgent business elsewhere whenever I approached. The isolation was surgical, precise. They'd turned me into a corporate leper. At home, it got worse. My boyfriend, Daniel, tried to be supportive at first, but I saw the doubt creeping into his eyes. "Maybe you pushed too hard," he said over dinner that Friday, his voice careful, measured. "Whitfield's been there 20 years. You can't just challenge people like that." I didn't challenge anyone. I asked about irregularities in a pension fund. That's challenging them. That's exactly what it is. He pushed his pasta around his plate, avoiding my gaze. Maybe this is a chance to recalibrate. Take a step back. Recalibrate. Like I was a machine that needed adjusting, not a person who'd been systematically destroyed for doing my job. My parents were worse. My father, ever the pragmatist, delivered his verdict over Sunday dinner. "You're 34, Emily. Maybe it's time to think about what really matters. Marriage, family. This career obsession isn't healthy." My mother nodded along, relief barely hidden in her expression. Finally, her daughter might stop this embarrassing pursuit of power and settle down properly. But the worst part wasn't the isolation or the disappointment. It was the humiliation that Redwood's leadership continued to heap upon me. They assigned me the work of interns, data entry, filing, fetching coffee for meetings I used to lead. Brad Morrison made a special point of it, stopping by my cubicle daily with mundane tasks. "Need these spreadsheets formatted by 3, he'd say, dropping files on my desk like feeding time at the zoo. "And make sure the conference room's set up for the board meeting. We'll need copies of everything, collated and bound." The board meeting, the one where they'd discuss the Davidson portfolio, the very account I'd raised concerns about. They wanted me to prepare the materials that would whitewash their crimes while standing outside the room like a secretary. During one particularly degrading afternoon, Whitfield himself summoned me. Not to his office, that would afford me too much dignity. He called me to the executive break room, where half the leadership team was enjoying their catered lunch. "Emily," he said, not looking up from his phone. "The Xerox on the 5th floor is acting up. Could you handle it? You always were good with the details." The room went silent. 8 executives, all men, watched me stand there in my $300 suit, being asked to fix a copier like a maintenance worker. Morrison actually chuckled. "Of course, Mr. Whitfield," I replied, my voice steady as granite. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my laptop screen. My savings would last maybe 4 months. My resume, once impressive, now carried the stench of demotion. Who would hire a senior analyst who'd been busted down to entry level? The narrative was already written. Difficult woman couldn't handle pressure, made waves, got what she deserved. My best friend, Lisa, tried to talk sense into me over wine. Just quit, find something else. This is killing you. They want me to quit, I said, my wine glass trembling slightly. That's the point. If I quit, I get nothing. No severance, no unemployment. They win clean. Then stick it out until you find something better. You don't understand. I turned to face her, and she must have seen something in my eyes because she pulled back slightly. They didn't just demote me. They destroyed me. My reputation. My credibility. It's all gone. In this industry, in this city, I'm radioactive now. The weight of it crashed down. The bills, the career I'd built now in ashes, the future I'd planned suddenly erased. They'd decided I was worth less than the coffee I now fetched, and they'd made sure everyone knew it. But in that crushing darkness, something else grew. Not hope. Hope was for people who still believed in justice. This was different. This was the cold certainty of someone with nothing left to lose. They'd stripped me of everything I'd worked for, reduced me to nothing in their corporate hierarchy. But in doing so, they'd made a fatal error. They'd freed me from the fear of consequences. What more could they take? What further could I fall? The humiliation was complete. The degradation, absolute. And in that abyss, I found my purpose. If they'd decided my worth was nothing, then I'd show them what nothing could do when it had evidence of everything. It started with a number that didn't belong. 3 weeks into my humiliation tour, while formatting Morrison's expense reports, another degrading task designed to remind me of my fall, I noticed it. A transaction code that shouldn't exist in our system. TRX 9947 OFCEL. Offshore designation. But routed through our domestic pension management accounts. I'd seen thousands of transaction codes in my 6 years. This one was wrong. At first, I told myself to ignore it, keep my head down, do the mindless work, survive. But that number gnawed at me. During my lunch break, alone in the third-floor break room that smelled of microwaved fish, I pulled up our transaction database. The code appeared 17 times in the last quarter alone, always attached to the Davidson Pension Fund, the same account I'd questioned before my demotion. Each transaction moved exactly $749,000, just under the $750,000 threshold that triggered automatic federal reporting. That evening, as the office emptied and my cubicle neighbors fled to their real lives, I stayed behind. The third floor after hours was a ghost town, perfect for someone who'd become a ghost herself. I dove deeper into the system, using my old access codes that ET hadn't bothered to revoke. Arrogance. They'd broken me so thoroughly, they couldn't imagine I'd dare to look. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in darkness. Money flowing from pension funds into offshore accounts, then disappearing into shell companies with names like Azure Holdings and Pinnacle Investments, companies that existed only on paper, registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. You're here late. I nearly jumped out of my skin. Jacob Miles stood behind me, holding a laptop and wearing that rumpled look Ike guys perfected. Young, maybe 25, with intelligent eyes behind thick glasses. Just finishing Morrison's reports, I said, minimizing my screen too quickly. He smiled, not the cruel smirk I'd grown accustomed to, but something almost sympathetic. Right. Morrison's reports that require access to the executive transaction database. My blood froze. Relax, he said, pulling up a chair uninvited. If I was going to report you, I wouldn't have announced myself. He glanced at my screen. Besides, someone should be looking at those transactions. I don't know what you mean. Sure you don't. He opened his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Just like I don't know that Whitfield had me install a parallel server 6 months ago. Off the books, completely isolated from our main system. He turned the screen toward me. The same server processing these interesting transactions you're not looking at. The screen showed a hidden network architecture, a shadow system running parallel to Redwood's official infrastructure. My mouth went dry. "Why are you showing me this?" Jacob shrugged. "Maybe because they made me set up their dirty laundry system and pay me like I'm changing printer cartridges. Maybe because I watched them destroy you for asking questions. Or maybe," he leaned back, "because I'm curious what someone with nothing to lose might do with interesting information. This could get us both fired, or worse. You're already destroyed professionally. And me?" He laughed bitterly. "I'm invisible to them. The help. The guy who fixes their computers and pretends not to see their browser history." He stood up, closing his laptop. "I'm not saying I'm helping you. I'm just saying that sometimes, when I'm doing routine maintenance on that parallel server, Thursdays, around 7 p.m., I might accidentally leave certain administrative panels open. And if someone happened to be looking at the right time..." He walked away, then paused. "Oh, and Emily? You might want to look into Mercury Consulting. It's fascinating how a company that doesn't seem to exist can receive so much money from pension funds." Thursday couldn't come fast enough. I spent the days playing the broken woman, fetching coffee, making copies, enduring Morrison's daily humiliations. But my nights were different. I researched Mercury Consulting, finding nothing but dead ends and shell corporations layered like Russian dolls. When Thursday evening arrived, I waited until the floor emptied, then navigated to the server addresses Jacob had shown me. True to his word, an administrative panel sat open, a window into Redwood's shadow operations. What I found made my stomach turn. It wasn't just money laundering. The pension funds, retirement savings of thousands of public employees, were being systematically drained. Small amounts, calculated to avoid detection, funneled through the shadow system into accounts controlled by Redwood's executives. But that was just the appetizer. The main course was political. Payments to campaign funds, to patsies, to politicians' personal foundations. Bribes dressed up as consulting fees. Senator Richard Hawthorne, champion of financial deregulation, had received $12 million through Mercury Consulting. Colorado Attorney General Michael Foster, the man who'd killed 3 investigations into Redwood, had his mortgage paid off through Azure Holdings. They weren't just stealing. They were buying the system designed to stop them. I started taking screenshots, downloading files to encrypted drives, building a map of their corruption. Each piece of evidence felt like recovering a piece of myself they'd tried to destroy. They'd decided my worth, ground me down to nothing. But nothing, I was learning, could slip through cracks that something never could. The scope was staggering. $37 million diverted in the last year alone. 8 politicians compromised. 2 federal investigations mysteriously shelved. And at the center of it all, Robert Whitfield's digital signature on every authorization. As I sat in that empty office, surrounded by the hum of computers and the weight of evidence, I realized the beautiful irony. They'd demoted me to make me invisible, to neutralize the threat I posed. But invisibility, it turned out, was exactly what I needed. They'd created the perfect conditions for their own destruction, and they'd never see it coming from someone whose worth they'd already decided was 0. The first warning came through my apartment door at 2 a.m. A manila envelope, no postage, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. Me at my desk after hours. Computer screen visible, clearly showing the transaction database. The message was clear. "We're watching." I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt oddly validated. If they were threatening me, it meant I'd found something real. The next morning, my personal laptop crashed. Complete system failure. The repair shop said it looked like someone had remotely fried the motherboard, sophisticated work, expensive equipment. My phone started acting strange too. Calls dropping, mysterious static, battery draining in hours. "You look tired," Morrison commented during one of his degradation visits, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Maybe you should focus on your actual job instead of extracurricular activities." Daniel left that week, no explanation, just a text. "I can't do this anymore, don't contact me." When I went to his apartment, The doorman told me Daniel had specifically asked that I be kept out. The timing wasn't coincidental. My bank called about suspicious activity on my accounts. My credit cards were mysteriously declined. My car tires were slashed in the secure office parking garage. No cameras happened to be working that day. The message escalated from clear to deafening. Stop digging, or we'll bury you. Even my family turned colder. My father called, his voice strained. Emily, some men came to my office today. They said you've been making trouble at work, accessing things you shouldn't. They mentioned my construction contracts with the city might need review if you don't stop whatever you're doing. They were attacking everything I touched, everyone I loved. The isolation became suffocating. Lisa stopped returning calls after her employer suddenly found performance issues with her work. My landlord gave me 30 days' notice. The building was being renovated. Late one night, walking to my car, footsteps echoed behind me. Two men, keeping pace, never quite catching up, but never falling behind. I ducked into a 24-hour diner, hands shaking as I pretended to read a menu. They waited outside for an hour before disappearing. Jacob found me the next day in the supply closet, crying over reams of printer paper. They're escalating, he said simply. They're destroying everything. Which means you're close to something that matters. He handed me a burner phone. My number's programmed. If something happens, something is happening. Everything is happening. No, he said firmly. If something happens to you, document everything, every threat, every incident. Build a dead man's switch. The pressure intensified. My desk was searched while I was at lunch, poorly, like they wanted me to know. Dead flowers appeared in my cubicle. Someone keyed bitch into my car door. A brick through my apartment window with a note. Next time, it won't be the window. I started sleeping at different friends' places, never the same location twice. I kept copies of evidence in multiple locations. Safety deposit boxes, encrypted cloud servers, even old-fashioned paper copies with my lawyer. The paranoia was exhausting, but it kept me alive. The breaking point came when they went after my mother. She called, hysterical. Her medical records had been leaked online, including her psychiatric treatment for depression 20 years ago. Her employer was concerned. Her church friends were worried. The violation was so personal, so cruel. It took my breath away. That night, sitting in a motel room I'd paid for with cash, I stared at the evidence I'd gathered. Enough to destroy them. But at what cost? Everyone I loved was suffering. My life was in ruins. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't worth the fight. But then I looked at the numbers again. 37 million stolen from pension funds. Teachers, firefighters, nurses. People who'd worked their entire lives for that money. People like my mother, who deserved dignity in retirement, not executives stealing their futures for yacht upgrades. They'd made this personal, but it was always bigger than me. They'd decided my worth was nothing, then proved they'd do anything to stop nothing from exposing them, which meant nothing was exactly what they should fear most. The breakthrough came from the last place I expected, Morrison's own arrogance. He'd been particularly cruel that Friday, making me organize his personal files while he watched, commenting on how attention to detail was better suited to my new position. Among his country club receipts and mistress's shopping bills, I found it. A USB drive, unlabeled, forgotten in a folder about golf tournaments. I pocketed it, my heart hammering. That night, in a public library 30 miles from Denver. I plugged it into a computer running a virtual machine. What opened made me forget to breathe. It was their insurance policy, the complete record of every illegal transaction, every bribe, every stolen dollar. But more than that, it contained recordings. Whitfield, Morrison, the entire leadership team, discussing their crimes with the casual confidence of untouchable men. They'd been recording each other, mutual blackmail to ensure mutual silence. One file stood out, Hawthorne Arrangement, Final, MP4. The video showed Whitfield and Senator Hawthorne in Whitfield's office, crystal clear, discussing the exact amount needed to kill the federal investigation into Redwood. Hawthorne actually laughed as he said, For $15 million, I'll make sure the SEC forgets you exist. But the crown jewel was a spreadsheet titled Distribution Schedule. Every executive's take from the pension fraud down to the penny. Every politician's payoff, with dates and amounts. Account numbers in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. A complete map of their criminal empire. Morrison, the fool, had been keeping his own protection file. Evidence to blackmail his partners if needed. He'd handed me the nuclear weapon. I spent the weekend creating copies, encrypting files, building an unassailable package of evidence. Jacob helped, his IT expertise ensuring everything was forensically sound, legally admissible, and impossible to dispute. "This is it," he said, looking at the compiled evidence. "This destroys all of them." "Not yet," I replied. "It needs to be surgical, public, undeniable." We mapped out every player, every connection. Senator Hawthorne was announcing his presidential run in 2 weeks. Whitfield had a major investor presentation scheduled. The timing had to be perfect. Maximum exposure, minimum chance for cover-up. I reached out to Marcus Reeves, an investigative journalist at the Denver Post who'd been trying to expose Redwood for years. We met at Union Station, public enough to be safe, loud enough to prevent recording. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, scrolling through the evidence on an encrypted tablet. This is Watergate level. Can you verify it independently? With this, I can verify everything. But Emily, once this goes public, they'll come for you hard. They already have. I've got nothing left to lose." That was a lie. I had one thing left, the satisfaction of watching them burn. Marcus needed a week to verify, to coordinate with federal prosecutors who weren't on Redwood's payroll. A week of pure hell, knowing I was sitting on a ticking bomb. Morrison seemed to sense something, his cruelty tinged with nervousness. "You've been quiet lately," he observed, standing too close to my cubicle. "Not planning anything stupid, are you?" "Just focusing on my work, Mr. Morrison. Attention to detail, like you said." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw it. Fear. Just a flicker, but unmistakable. He knew something was wrong but couldn't place it. The predator sensing it might be prey. 3 days before the story would break, I did something perhaps foolish but necessary. I went to Whitfield's office after hours, using my old executive access card that still, miraculously, worked. He was there, of course. The man lived in that office. "Emily." He didn't seem surprised. "I wondered when you'd come." "You know what I have." He poured himself a scotch, didn't offer me one. "I know you think you have something. Morrison's files, the complete record." His hand paused for just a second. "Brad can be careless." $15 million to Senator Hawthorne. The exact amount is actually $15,200,000. The extra $200,000 was his son's gambling debts. The color drained from his face. "What do you want?" "Nothing you can give me. You already decided my worth, remember? 0, nothing." I smiled. Turns out nothing can't be bought, threatened, or destroyed. Nothing is what's going to end you. We can make a deal. No. You made your decision. Now live with the consequences. I walked out, leaving him with his scotch and his fear. In 72 hours, his world would end. The video files, the bank records, the evidence Morrison had so carefully compiled, it would all be public. Federal agents were already preparing warrants. They'd decided my worth. Now, the world would decide theirs. The plan required precision. Marcus Reeves had connected me with Sandra Kim, a federal prosecutor with the DOJ's White-Collar Crime Division, one of the few not touched by Redwood's influence. We met in a safe house in Aurora, where 2 FBI agents reviewed every piece of evidence. "This is enough for RICO charges," Sandra said, her voice barely containing excitement. "Racketeering, money laundering, bribery of federal officials. We're talking life sentences." "When do we move?" I asked. "Whitfield's investor presentation is Thursday." Senator Hawthorne's presidential announcement is Saturday. If we coordinate with Marcus's story, she smiled coldly. Maximum impact. The next 3 days blurred together. Secret meetings in parking garages, encrypted phone calls, documents signed in the back of unmarked cars. I was technically a whistleblower now, protected by federal law. But we all knew protection meant nothing if Redwood got to me first. Jacob created the digital strategy. The evidence would be released simultaneously across multiple platforms, WikiLeaks, every major news outlet, social media. Even if they killed the story in one place, it would explode everywhere else. It's beautiful, he said, showing me the setup. The moment Marcus publishes, automated systems will distribute everything. They can't stop it, can't contain it, can't deny it. Tuesday night, I couldn't sleep. Tomorrow. Marcus would meet with Whitfield for a routine interview about the investor presentation. In reality, he'd be giving them one last chance to comment before the story destroyed them. Standard journalistic practice, but also psychological warfare. Let them know the end was coming. I watched from across the street as Marcus entered the Redwood building Wednesday morning. An hour later, he emerged, and even from a distance, I could see his satisfied smile. He texted me simply, "They panicked beautifully." That afternoon, the office was chaos. Emergency meetings, frantic phone calls, Morrison literally running between offices. They knew something was coming, but not what, not when. The beauty of Morrison's own files being used against them. They couldn't deny what they'd documented themselves. From my cubicle, I watched them scramble like rats on a sinking ship. Whitfield had aged 5 years in 2 days. Morrison was sweating through his $500 shirt. The other executives huddled in glass offices, their guilty faces visible to everyone. "Something big is happening," my cubicle neighbor whispered. "Heard Whitfield's been calling senators all morning." If only she knew those senators were about to be indicted too. Wednesday evening, Sandra called. "FBI raids tomorrow, 6 a.m. sharp. They'll hit simultaneously, Redwood offices, executive homes, even Hawthorne's campaign headquarters. You need to be somewhere public, somewhere safe." "I'll be at work," I said. "I want to see their faces." "That's not safe." "None of this has been safe. I'm seeing it through." That night, I sat in my ransacked apartment. I'd stopped fixing things they destroyed and felt in strange peace. Tomorrow, everything would change. They'd tried to reduce me to nothing, but nothing had found the one piece of evidence that mattered. Morrison's greed, his need for insurance against his partners, had given me everything. I thought about the teachers whose pensions they'd stolen, the retirees living on less because executives needed another yacht. I thought about every woman they'd destroyed for asking questions, every employee they'd silenced with threats. Tomorrow was for all of us. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. But I recognized Whitfield's personal cell. "Emily, please. We can work this out. 50 million. Cash. Untraceable." I didn't respond. 100 million. Executive position at any firm you want. We have connections everywhere. Still nothing. "Answer me, you stupid bitch. Do you know what you're doing? You're destroying everything. Hundreds of jobs, the economy." I blocked the number, let him scream into the void. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus sent the final draft of his story. The headline was perfect. "The Redwood Conspiracy: How Denver's largest investment firm stole millions and bought politicians." At midnight, I sent a single email to all Redwood employees from an anonymous account. The subject line read, "The truth about your leaders." Attached was Morrison's complete file. By morning, everyone would know. The FBI would be at their doors, the senators would be in handcuffs, and I would be in my cubicle, invisible as always, watching an empire built on lies collapse into dust. They'd decided my worth was nothing. Tomorrow, nothing would have its revenge. Thursday, 5:47 a.m., I sat in my car outside Redwood Capital Group, watching the sunrise paint the glass tower gold. In 13 minutes, FBI agents would simultaneously breach 12 locations across 3 states. The Denver Post's website would go live with Marcus's story. The world would learn what Redwood really was. My phone buzzed with texts from Sandra Kim. Teams in position. Stand by. At 5:58, black SUVs materialized around the building like shadows becoming solid. No sirens. They wanted surprise. I walked through the lobby at 5:59, badge in, smiled at the security guard who'd watched my humiliation for months. Early morning, Ms. Carter? The earliest? The elevator climbed to the 3rd floor. I made coffee, sat at my pathetic cubicle, and waited. 6 a.m. The explosion wasn't literal, but it might as well have been. FBI agents poured through the entrances, weapons drawn, voices commanding. Through the floor's windows, I watched them fan across the executive level above. The building's emergency lights activated, bathing everything in pulsing red. My computer pinged. The Denver Post story was live. Within seconds, my phone erupted with notifications as every news outlet picked it up. CNN. Breaking. Major investment firm accused of massive fraud. Wall Street Journal. Federal raids target Redwood Capital in corruption probe. Employees began arriving for their normal day, only to be met by federal agents. The whispers turned to shouts, confusion to chaos. Someone had printed Marcus's article, copies spreading like wildfire. People read about their bosses' crimes in real time while those same bosses were being arrested above us. At 6:47, they brought Whitfield down. He was in handcuffs, his perfect suit disheveled, his commanding presence reduced to a shuffling perp walk. Our eyes met as they led him past the 3rd floor. The recognition in his face, the understanding of who had done this, was worth every threat, every humiliation, every destroyed relationship. Morrison came next, actually crying. His tough guy facade shattered. Then the others, a parade of men who'd thought themselves untouchable, now touched by federal justice. The office erupted, people crying, shouting, some actually cheering. The Securities Fraud Division was celebrating. They'd suspected but never had proof. The IT department was in shock, except for Jacob, who caught my eye and nodded slightly. By 8 a.m., news vans surrounded the building. Senator Hawthorne's arrest at his campaign headquarters was playing on every screen. The footage was beautiful, him being led away while his own presidential announcement banner hung behind him. My phone rang. Marcus Reeves. You want to make a statement? You're the hero here. Emily. No statement. The evidence speaks for itself. You know they'll figure out it was you eventually. Let them. What are they going to do from federal prison? The building went into lockdown. FBI agents interviewed everyone, seized computers, boxed up documents. When they reached my cubicle, the lead agent, a woman named Patricia Chen, looked at my setup and smiled slightly. Ms. Carter, we'll need you to come with us. Witness protection protocols. As we walked out, the entire 3rd floor watched. The invisible woman, the demoted failure, walking with federal agents like she mattered. Someone started clapping, then another. Soon, the entire floor, people who'd ignored me for months, gave me a standing ovation. The FBI drove me to the federal building, where Sandra Kim waited with a team of prosecutors. The evidence is overwhelming, she said. Whitfield's already trying to make a deal. But with what you provided, he's looking at 40 years minimum. What about the pension funds? Frozen and being recovered. The teachers, firefighters, all of them, they'll get their money back, with interest. On the news, Redwood's stock price flatlined. Trading, suspended. The company worth $2 billion at market open was worthless by noon. Clients fled, employees scattered. The building itself would be seized as asset forfeiture. Morrison apparently had a complete breakdown, screaming about his USB drive, demanding to know how it was found. Whitfield, ever the strategist, figured it out immediately. The look on his face when he realized his partner's paranoid insurance policy had destroyed them all. The agent said it was like watching a man's soul leave his body. By evening, 47 arrests had been made. 3 senators, 2 state attorneys general, 14 Redwood executives, and dozens of accomplices. The largest corruption case in Colorado history, they called it. The pension fraud alone totaled over $300 million. I sat in a federal safe house, watching the news coverage with Sandra and her team. Every channel led with the story. Every website had it bannered. The evidence, Morrison's meticulous records, made denial impossible. "You know what the best part is?" Sandra said, pouring wine despite it being a school night. Morrison kept those files to blackmail his partners if needed. His own greed, his own lack of trust in thieves just like him. That's what brought them down. My phone had hundreds of messages. Job offers from legitimate firms, interview requests from every network, book deal proposals. The woman they'd valued at 0 was suddenly worth everything to everyone. But I didn't care about any of that. I cared about the image on the screen. Whitfield in an orange jumpsuit, Morrison in custody. Senator Hawthorne's presidential dreams dead. And every executive who'd laughed at my demotion now facing decades in prison. They'd decided my worth. I'd decimated theirs. With a single piece of evidence, one paranoid executive's insurance policy, I'd brought down an empire. I never went back to Redwood Capital Group. There was no need. The building was seized by federal agents. The company dissolved within days. Every asset liquidated, every contract voided. The glass tower that had been my prison became a crime scene. Then eventually, just another Denver office building with a dark history. The trials lasted 18 months. I testified for 7 days, walking the jury through every transaction, every forged document, every stolen dollar. Morrison broke on day 3 of his trial, turning state's evidence in a desperate plea for leniency. It didn't help. He got 25 years, reduced from 40. Whitfield maintained his innocence until the end, even when the jury delivered 42 guilty verdicts, even when the judge sentenced him to 57 years. He stared at me with those cold eyes, still believing he'd done nothing wrong. He died in federal prison 3 years later. Heart attack during an argument over commissary privileges. Senator Hawthorne's fall was the most public. His presidential campaign headquarters became FBI evidence. His political career evaporated overnight. 30 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. The man who'd killed investigations into Redwood ended up being its most famous casualty. But the morning after the arrests, sitting in that federal safe house, I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just empty. They'd taken everything from me in their attempt to silence me. My career, my relationships, my sense of safety. Getting justice didn't give any of that back. Sandra Kim understood. "You're a hero to thousands of pension holders, but I know it doesn't feel that way." She was right. Heroes don't sit alone in safe houses, afraid to use their real names, unable to trust anyone because paranoia has become survival instinct. Jacob visited once, before entering witness protection himself. "We did the right thing," he said, but his eyes held the same hollowness I felt. Did we? Or did we just do the only thing left? He didn't answer. The settlement negotiations were swift. The recovered funds, the seized assets, the liquidated holdings. All of it went to making the pension holders whole. Every teacher, every firefighter, every nurse got their retirement back, plus damages. That felt like something, at least. I received a whistleblower award, 15% of the recovered funds, $47 million. The woman they'd valued at 0 was now worth more than most of their annual bonuses combined. The irony wasn't lost on me. But money doesn't fix broken trust. Daniel never called. My parents remained distant, ashamed of the attention, the scandal. Lisa tried to reconnect, but the friendship was fractured. Another casualty of Redwood's war against me. I left Denver the day after the last trial, packed what little remained of my life, and disappeared. Changed my name, changed my appearance, became someone new in a city where Redwood Capital Group was just another corporate scandal, forgotten as soon as the next one emerged. Sometimes I Google them. Morrison's wife divorced him, took the kids, moved to France. Brad's son published a tell-all book about growing up with a criminal father. The other executives scattered to minimum security prisons across the country, their legacies reduced to Wikipedia footnotes about corporate corruption. The third-floor employees, the ones who applauded when I left with the FBI, they landed on their feet. Most found better jobs at ethical firms that saw Redwood survivors as battle-tested and trustworthy. The securities fraud division guys who'd celebrated that morning, they started their own investment firm, built on transparency and actual fiduciary duty. Marcus Reeves won a Pulitzer for his reporting. In his acceptance speech, he thanked an unnamed source who'd risked everything to expose the truth. I watched from a hotel room in Portland, raising a glass of wine to the television. Sandra Kim became the Attorney General of Colorado, running on a platform of corruption reform. She never revealed my identity, even when pressed. A promise kept, honor among those who still believed in justice. But late at night, when sleep won't come, I don't think about the victories or the vindication. I think about that moment in Whitfield's office, when he asked what I wanted, and I told him nothing. Because that's what I was to them, nothing. And nothing, it turns out, is the most dangerous thing to create. Nothing has no stakes, no fear, no future to protect. Nothing can bring down everything, because everything has so much to lose. They decided my worth, so I decimated theirs. Not with armies or influence or power, but with a single piece of evidence left carelessly in a folder by a paranoid man who trusted no one, not even his partners in crime. Morrison's USB drive. Such a small thing to destroy such large lives. The last time I checked, the Redwood building had been converted to affordable housing. Teachers, firefighters, nurses, the very people they'd stolen from, now lived in the tower where titans once plotted. The poetry of it almost made me smile. My new life is quiet. I work as a consultant, helping companies identify internal fraud. They don't know my real name or my history, but they trust my instincts. I've seen the worst of corporate corruption, and I know its patterns, its arrogance, its inevitable weakness, the greed that makes criminals document their own crimes. Sometimes young employees come to me, worried about things they've seen, numbers that don't add up, executives who seem untouchable. I listen, I guide, and occasionally, I share a piece of hard-won wisdom. Your worth isn't decided by them. It's decided by what you do when they try to destroy you. And sometimes, being reduced to nothing is exactly what you need to become everything they should have feared. They decided my worth, so I decimated theirs. With a single piece of evidence. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts below. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you.